Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to our first ever town hall meeting with my brother who will be co-hosting with me today, Dame Dash. I want to thank Dame and Dame Dash Studio, OSG, and everyone else who thought, coming to hang out with us tonight would be a great idea. So Dame, how you doing today, brother?
I'm pretty good. I'm a little bothered that we both have on the same outfit today. But
no, we don't have the same outfit,
because we made it. I'm all right with it.
My man.
So we in the team, but this is super fresh. I like to be the freshest.
No doubt. I think you had a lot to do with that. I think you had a lot to do with that, man. Your brain definitely made this happen.
I designed the logo and we made the clothes, but I'm an artist too as well. So once I understood the movement, that's what I visualized, and it was fresh. So
absolutely,
the whole thing about us coming together, we call it the commission, is that we all are fresh, and we're fresh because we fight for people other than ourselves. We fight for love, and we're all specialists in certain things. So I bring the entrepreneurial independence. You bring all of the principles. The bishop brings all the history of religion, and the senator and the congressman, and so on and so forth. Dr. Chris with the medicine, all of it. And
don't forget Taje. Don't forget our Taje. Don't forget our man Taje.
Let me say Senator Senator Eddie Melton and Congressman Andre Carson. So, Loon just came home from jail, and his experience is intense. And, his journey, I learned a lot. I'm waiting for him to get on, but, he has a lot of agendas as it relates to prison reform. And, I think the thing about prison is it's about what gets you there before you get there, and recognizing all the trauma, the education, and the structure, and the patterns, all the things that really the prisons are built to prepare you from day one to get there if you aren't ready to actually adapt to a system that's not for you. So
absolutely.
I like to leverage my celebrity and my platform to showcase the things and the problems that we need to fix, not expecting our oppressor to fix it, but the way we're going to deal with it. So we have senators and congressmen, but we also have us, but we're combined. I'm calling that the commission.
The commission, baby.
And our agenda today, because of Loon, is I see Dr. Riley there, is prison reform and our agenda on how to fix it. But also, I think we need to deal with everything else that is going on today that's urgent. So there's chess and checkers that goes on when we talk.
Absolutely, Dame. And in addition to prison reform, we will touch on the COVID-19 pandemic, and we would also talk about the upcoming election as well. So I definitely am looking forward to this opportunity to not only host alongside you, but to also bring some amazing guests on with us. So, Dame, one of the things that I wanted to start with by way of conversation is, again, I want to hold off on prison reform for a little while, if you don't mind, Dame.
If Loon gets here.
Yeah, we're gonna wait.
Loon is here though.
Okay, all right. So what we'll do, Dame, is we'll just touch a little bit on the election. I know you and I have been talking a lot about these debates. One that took place last week and another one this week. You want to talk a little bit about what your impressions have been of the candidates?
Well, I think Trump makes things fairly obvious, who his audience is. Basically, is white supremacists that don't have money, that can't dress, that don't know anything about music or respect culture. And, I think he makes us recognize who exactly we have to watch. Like just today or yesterday, these white supremacists were going to try to kidnap the governor. Now, remember I told you, I was like, now they hot and they not that strong. It's going to be easy.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing to know our oppressor and exactly who they are and their attitude. He showcases just that. I thought that the vice presidential debate, so Trump lost that debate. He's looking ridiculous, getting sick and still trying to look strong by looking weak. And, everybody that has agreed with him, everyone that he's given advice to should now be looking stupid in the barbershop. Anyone that's had an argument that said, oh, COVID is not real, and not to wear a mask. And, it just makes him look dumb, and whoever supported him look dumb, at least on that point. And the fact that he couldn't say that he's not a white supremacist shows that he is, and that's who he's playing to. I think it's obvious. And everyone needs to watch the Proud Boys. So if I choke on the bone, get at whoever we know they've been calling out, period. And any one of us, we know who to go to. So, on that level, I think I feel safer because, just because we know who's at us don't mean we got to be scared of. I ain't scared of nobody. I think collectively we're way stronger than anybody that's against us. I think we just have to be aware of that. As it relates to the vice presidential election, I thought Harris did her thing because she didn't look like an angry woman. I thought she was reserved. The fly got on homie because he's a piece of shit, and that seems fairly obvious. So I was happy. I thought they played it safe. I think they know they so ahead in the game that the vice president, Pence, would have to really make an effort to swing hard, and he didn't swing hard at all. He just wanted to in a fight that he's losing. So she didn't have to really do anything. She didn't have to sweat. She regulated him with dignity and taste. Like, yo, I'm talking. I think the way things are playing out, karma. I don't know who paid that fly, but I love that fly who fly. And I don't like flies, but I like that fly that's the one that's head forward.
I got
a little bit, but I like everything that was going on.
Good, Dame. So, again, keeping with people who we know are experts in not only in politics and community development, I want us to bring in our brother, Senator Eddie Melton from Gary, Indiana.
What's up, fella?
There he is. What's going on, Senator Melton?
What's going on? What's up?
Pretty good, man. Good to see you. Good to see you, brother. Good to see you.
Thanks.
So, again, this is a very important time of the year for everybody. And I think, one of the things that Dame and I consistently talk about is the need to get out there and vote, and the need to actually look at what's out there in front of us and say, we can actually achieve this. We can accomplish this. Right. What is it that's going to take? What is it going to take for us to get the type of change that we're looking for in this country based on just voting?
This election is the one, man. Right now what we're trying to do is push constantly the early voting. We're trying to get folks to fill out those absentee ballots, especially the states that have those opportunities. In Indiana is going to be a little bit more difficult when it comes down to no excuse absentee voting. But right now we're started early voting, and the folks are heading to the polls right now. So we're telling every person, get your mother, get your brother, your sisters, whoever, get them in a car and get them down to the poll.
Well, let me just stop there, and because one of the things that I'm finding out about is an understanding now more so than before was the early voting, right? Can you talk to people who may not know what that is and basically in what states and things like that? Because I'm here in New York, Dame is in LA, and you're in Indiana. So what does that look like?
Right, it's going to look different from state to state. A lot of states right now, because of COVID, they have it where you can vote by mail because they're trying to protect the citizens. Now, there are some states currently, like right now, like Indiana, you have to have an excuse to vote absentee. Right? You have to have an excuse. Either you have a sickness, an illness, you're going to be out of the area. So we're just encouraging folks to look into what state regulations you have and figure out how can you vote early. The other option is you can go to a poll. We got a couple of designated locations in my county. I know it's different in Marion County where Congressman Carson is as well. You have designated locations where folks can vote early right now. So take advantage of the opportunity. You know what's going to happen before Election Day. So get it out the way, get those votes in so they can get counted.
Hey, Senator,
yes.
I think it's important to focus on the swing states. And, I know, again, everyone should vote. But if, we vote in California, we win in California, we win in New York. But in North Carolina, it's particularly interesting because this is a state that's traditionally Republican, and we're only down like 2 points. We had the Congressman Carson put on the congressman from North Carolina the other day, and he was like, it's 2%.
Right.
it's important to know that in North Carolina right now, it does make a difference if you vote.
Absolutely.
If you're in Pennsylvania, it does make a difference if you vote. If you're in Florida, it does make a difference if you vote. If you're in Indiana, it does make a difference if you vote. Like we got all these other places, but North Carolina got to stand up, Pennsylvania got to stand up, and Florida got to stand up.
Without a doubt.
And Dame, staying right here, I want to also bring in Congressman Butterfield, who's also from North Carolina. He's here. Congressman Butterfield.
Is here? Oh, he's an OG. Bring him in, please.
I think he was trying to get in, Dame, and we may have to come back to him in a little bit, but he's definitely one that needs to come on. I think there's quite a few people backstage, but we're going to get him on in a second. So just wanted to get back to that because what he talked about with us the other day, Dame, was the importance of North Carolina and how. Remember what he told you, Dame? How close are we to being able to
like 2 points.
Make a change
2 points
in North Carolina?
2 points.
And what does that mean, Senator Melton? What does that mean? 2 points. Like, what does that mean for that?
It means that margin of error is getting slimmer and slimmer in terms of the amount of people that is looking to vote for a particular candidate right now. So based off, and I didn't hear the news or the information that you guys specifically are talking about, but I'm assuming we're saying that Vice President Joe Biden is within 2 points, or is that the case? Is what they're yeah. So that's huge. It typically imposed like that. There's a margin of error, give a 5 or 6 points, right? So that means that it's extremely close. It's extremely close. So you want to encourage folks to take it up another notch.
Wow. So basically, and how's things out in Indiana? Like where are we right now in terms of the voting process now in Indiana?
Man, folks are standing in line right now, wrapped around a corner for early voting. So that's a good sign. The tricky thing with Indiana, in Northwest Indiana, we're predominantly a Democratic stronghold for the state. Northwest Indiana, we're close to Chicagoland area, but the rest of the state is somewhat conservative. So they quote unquote call us a red state. So to all those elected officials on the national level, don't take Indiana for granted just because we're labeled as a red state. There's Democrats here as well that can flip this state blue. We did it in 2008 with President Obama. Indiana turned blue, and folks don't want to recognize that or acknowledge that. And it can happen again with the right candidates in place. But another thing we got to make sure we talk about tonight is voter suppression, because
absolutely
is taking place in a lot of different places. You see the attack they put on the United States Postal Service, where they're trying to prohibit a lot of the post offices from taking in those ballots. But voter suppression can look of different ways. Uneducated folks in terms of not knowing that there's this misnomer that in certain states that people with a felony can't vote. In Indiana, that's not the case. So we've been on a campaign to let folks know, just because you have a felony, just because you've been in jail, doesn't mean you have to sit this election out.
People think they can't vote because they're felons.
Absolutely.
That's a big deal. We need to let people know that.
Absolutely. But again, like Dennis said, it depends on your state. You got to check your state laws.
Well, can we find which state so we can make people aware of which states that felons can vote? I think we should focus on that because they ain't going to tell us.
Absolutely. Let's get it done. We can push that information.
Okay, good. Well, I definitely want you to hang around with us a little bit, Senator Melton. I want to bring in
one more question. As far as voting, when would we expect? Because I'm about to have a baby. We scheduled November 13th. The election day is the 3rd. When do we, after the vote? I mean, rather after they count, after he tries to do all the bullshit. Because I don't want to be having a baby when the riots happen. So, when do you think they'll have a count? Is what I want to know.
So we can anticipate. I don't think, this is just me personally talking, I don't think we're going to know election night.
We're not going to know election night. We never really do. You already know what he's going to do. So he's not going to take that elbow lightly. He's not going to have it. He's going to jail. And that's another thing. Let me ask you this. If he gets off that seat, does he go to jail?
I don't know that, man. That's going to be a legal question right there with the taxes with
well, I felt like Mueller said, "Yo, we can't prosecute an acting president." So,
right, that's
do your job, Congress. That's what I heard him say. So, what does that mean if he's not the president? His whole front line is in jail. They all told on him. How can he not get prosecuted or at least indicted or something or charged? Is the minute he's not president.
That's a good
I
point.
think that's all he's hustling for right now is freedom.
Yeah, I think our congressional leaders, that's going to be something that they're going to have to look into.
But why? How come nobody's bringing that up, right? Like, if someone's a criminal and they don't want to go to jail, they're going to do and burn everything they can to stay out of jail. I just think it's something that should be brought up. Right. I don't know why they're not bringing up that his whole team is in jail. How come nobody's saying that? And they told on him. Why no? I mean, I know we play clean, but that's clean. That happened. No one's bringing up he got impeached. That's the only thing I'm mad about is he's giving us too much, but we're being so classy. I just don't want to underestimate how distasteful he gets and how much he cheats. Right. I think about it being on everything, or I will.
Well, Senator Melton, before you head out, is there anything you want to tell the audience today as it relates to this upcoming election that will definitely get them out and vote?
I mean, I think you guys hit on it in the beginning, right? And we got a lot of folks that's going to be on tonight that's going to talk from different perspectives. But I love what Dame is doing in terms of how he has built this commission of folks that bring different expertise, different backgrounds that can connect with people that we grew up, that look and learn, that live in communities that we connect with. So this election, we hear it every election. This is the most important election of our lifetime. Listen, I don't think we can say that every election, but this one, this is certainly the election that we
got to get it on this fight. How can we just go down and we not in on this and we warriors, we generals? This is the fight.
Everybody remember what it felt like waking up in 2016. Like, what the hell just happened, right? We got to make sure that there's no excuse that we can't say that we did not personally do all that we can and reach out to every single person to make sure that they knew their rights and they exercise their right to vote. So
just so we can front on our grandkids. Just so.
But Dave, hold on a second. Dave, let me bring Andre Carson. Let's bring in Andre Carson for this conversation. What's going on, brother?
The crew. Your brother Dennis, Senator, Chairman. Yes, sir.
Oh man, look who's in the house, man. Listen, I know you've been listening to us backstage, man. I wanted to, want you to kind of tag team in it with us.
Before we say anything, I wanted to say this about the congressman. From the second I met him, he's given me information that I never had. I'm talking about every moment. I walked past and saw Biden because he brought me there. He introduced me to all of Congress. He taught me the game so cold. He introduced me to the senator, and he brought me to the Black Caucus.
Absolutely.
The thing is, on some old, he even like I'm talking about when he met my son. My son came in with ripped jeans, and he said, "You could intern here, young man." And I really wish I would have made my son do that, But this is the type of black man that we need because he wants to give us information. He understands the culture. He's from where we from. You know what I mean? But I know my personal experiences. The minute I met him, we was family, and he treated me like family by information, and that's why I really, really, really trust him.
Well, Congressman,
that means a lot, man. I appreciate that, man. That means so much, man. And the opportunity stands with Boogie, man. It's always there, man.
You won't pick my call up. Please call that man. He's on my nerve with this.
Okay, give me his math, and I'll give him a shout out, man.
Yeah,
that'd be a good opportunity for him. And he's in a safe space, all of that. So
Congressman, let me jump in real quick and ask a quick question there, my brother. I mean, I think Dame just brought you in pretty good here. But question, where are you a congressman? You got to let the people know where you from, what you doing out there.
That's a wise educator, brother Dennis. Yes, sir. In Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm 2 hours away from my brother, Senator Eddie Melton. He's in Gary. I'm in Indianapolis. but we're all Hoosiers. So I represent most of Indianapolis, probably about 80% of the city. We have a few smaller towns in our district: Lawrence, Beech Grove, Speedway, the home of the Indy 500. But Indianapolis is on the move, brother. We got a lot of good people out in Indianapolis. Babyface, Mike Epps, the list goes on. Vivica Fox.
All right. So listen. So, Congressman, what we want this conversation to continue to evolve into is the importance of voting this election, right? I know we hear it it seems like almost every election past, for the past 8 years, we've been talking about the importance of getting out and vote. Why is that such an important thing to do this year? Why this year more than any other year?
Well, I think arguably this is the most impactful and most important election of our lifetimes. Why? Because we have a tyrant or wannabe tyrant in office. And I think we've seen the undermining of this experiment we call a democracy. And so for those people who, here's why it's important to vote. Even if you're not concerned about the presidential election, and you should be, if you like a car and you have a car and you like driving down the street, that is the result of a vote from a city council. If you stop at a stoplight, that is the result of legislation. If you go to the gas station and fill up and you're happy about the price or you're upset about the price, that is effectively the result of politicians negotiating deals to, according to the whims of the market, to set a price for what you pay for gas. And even the fact that you may go home or your apartment or your condo and turn on a light, that light that you turn on is a result of legislation produced that could create a pathway for electricity to flow in your and my homes. So politics impacts our lives each and every day. And if you pay taxes, you should vote, because if you pay taxes, you want representation representing your taxpayer dollars, be it a zoning board. If you want to build a school, Brother Dennis, if you want to build a youth center, you have to have someone on the zoning board who can approve those things. So if Chairman Dash wanted to build a studio in the middle of Iowa, in a small community in Iowa, I guarantee there'd have to be a zoning board. It'd have to be zoned in for him to build that studio. That's why it's so important to vote the right people in office.
So, Congressman, this is what I want you to understand from a guy that was there just like you. Going to court, going into a courthouse, even going to get a license, going into a motor vehicle is something that guys like us don't love. And really thinking that being able to change or talk to a congressman or talk to a councilman, I don't think people understand the accessibility that's there. So when you say these things, it's not to say that you have to know a congressman or senator. You have to know everybody and elect everybody.
That's right.
How can somebody, like, let's say someone doesn't like a law, right, in what's going on where they're at. Who exactly could they talk to get that law passed if there's something that's bothering them? Who should they talk to that's accessible to them?
Thank you, Dr. Riley. If it's an issue that, oftentimes we're more impacted directly by local politicians, be it a city councilor, a mayor, a state rep, a state senator, a governor. So you would talk to your local politician if it impacts you immediately. We're talking about prison reform, Chairman,
but what's a local politician? What's the title of that?
A local politician is the member of the school board. As parents, if we're concerned about some legislation or laws or rules that impact our school system, depending on your municipality where you're from, in some municipalities, school boards have more influence than others. In Indianapolis, we elect our school board members. I don't know how they do it over there, Brother McKesey, but we elect our school board members, and those school board members determine the budget for our school. So if you're concerned about dilapidated books, if you're concerned about a poor curriculum, if you're concerned about the discussion between traditional schools and charter schools, and the fact that charter schools have more freedom to educate than traditional schools, then that's an appeal you would make to your school board, who in turn hires your school superintendent. If that doesn't work, then of course that's when we bring in our state legislators like Senator Melton, because states have a lot more freedom and autonomy in many ways as it relates to education. We have federal guidelines, but states have a lot of autonomy. So Senator Melton could meet with his caucus or the committees of jurisdiction if he's not on it, or if he's a chairman or a ranking member, and the Senator Melton could introduce a bill that gets signed by the governor to change the ways in which schools operate in a particular state. In Senator Melton's case, it would be the state of Indiana. And so your city council, if Dame Dash Studios wanted to set up shop in Fort Wayne, Indiana, but there's a dirt road, he wanted an official road, and he wanted a stop sign and a stoplight leading up to his road, then Chairman Dash would go to a council hearing to make an appeal to his city councilor, and have his city councilor, I used to be on the city council, introduce an ordinance that would call for this particular state road or highway or lane be designated an official road, maybe Dash Drive, as a way to enter Dash Studios, so you could have a stoplight, a four-way stop, or roundabout. That's impacted by the city council. So everything that we do in most cases is impacted or governed by legislation. That's why it's important. If you like counting bread and you like counting money, make sure you pay your taxes, but also make sure that your dollars are represented equitably throughout the city, state, and federal government.
You know, Dennis, my issue is that everything you just said should logically be taught in school, and it's not.
Absolutely.
And that's why people are scared to get into certain businesses, because it's unknown to them. If this was taught to us when we're young, it would not feel uncomfortable or awkward or new to do. But this is
absolutely.
Even here.
So it looks like we got the prosecutor waiting, Carlette.
Yeah.
Dr.
Yes, I'm gonna bring Prosecutor Mears in. Prosecutor Mears, you in here? How you doing?
All right.
How are you? On here. Good to see you, Andre.
Yeah, man. You too, bro.
So prosecutor. So I mean, you know, obviously, again, a big year for everybody in terms of this election. Can you kind of talk to us a little bit about, you know, what your stance is about actually, you know, getting people out there and vote? And as a prosecutor, why do you feel it's important for that to happen?
Well, it's critically important because right now there's a national discussion about criminal justice issues and criminal justice reform, and that's going to take place at the legislative level. And we need strong leadership in federal government, like Congressman Andre Carson. We need strong leadership at the state level, like we have with Senator Eddie Melton, to make sure that we are advancing the cause of justice in our criminal justice system. We can't rely on the police departments to change themselves. We're going to need some laws passed. We're going to need legislation passed to make those changes. And so that's why it's so important everybody come out to vote. We all agree it's a problem. We all agree there needs to be changes, but that change starts at the ballot box.
Absolutely. And while
can I have and not to run your show, but you know, I got ADHD. You had students like me. Dane knows what I'm talking about. If the prosecutor quickly, if you could talk about what you did in Indianapolis as it relates to marijuana.
Yeah, so as soon as I became prosecutor, the first thing I did is I said, if you have less than an ounce of marijuana, we're not going to prosecute those cases. The reason we did that is we looked at who ended up in the criminal justice system, and it disproportionately impacted people of color. And, you know, if I see that there's an injustice in the criminal justice system and I don't do anything about it, then I'm part of the problem. And so, you know, when I read the Constitution, I see the Equal Protection Clause, and it says the law has to apply to everyone equally. It's important that I act. And so that's why we made that decision, because it disproportionately impacted people of color. It eroded trust in the criminal justice system, and it did nothing to further the cause of public safety in Indianapolis. And so we made that decision, and that's a good decision, a proactive decision to try to help people. So hopefully people look at us and say, hey, the prosecutor's office isn't there to jam us up. It's there to try to help us out.
So Prosecutor Mears, were there any people who opposed your decision to do that?
Yeah, I think Andre and I have some common friends who are against us on issues like that, and so there is some resistance to it. But at the end of the day, I sleep comfortable at night knowing that we did the right thing and we stood up for what we believe in. And if we believe that everybody needs to be treated fairly, that's the route we're going to go. And I'd rather err on the side of justice and protecting people's rights and making sure that everybody's treated fairly than anything else.
I have a question. As a prosecutor, if the president gets off, if Trump gets off the president, how many things did you prosecute him for?
Well, I think Cy Vance in Manhattan's on the right track. If you've paid attention to what he's doing with his tax returns, I think he's being pretty aggressive. I think the thing that's challenging for all of us is just how brazen this president has been and how willing he is to ignore the rule of law. And so we'd like to see some accountability on that issue.
Well, here's my question. If all his homeboys went to jail and they told on him, what did they tell on him for? What if there's nothing to tell? What did they tell?
Right. They're selling secrets because there's something there.
So basically, like I said, I saw Mueller say we can't do nothing to an acting president, so there's nothing to talk about. But do your job, Congress. Did he not say that? Yeah,
that's what he said. But I mean, there's a lot of things that he did before he was president that certainly a lot of people are looking into, in particular his taxes. And a couple of other issues that I know are being investigated pretty aggressively, and I think that's a good thing.
Can I ask a question to everybody? Don't you think that it should be a crime to be a public servant and lie and get caught time and time again? Shouldn't that be a crime?
Of course. I think
I don't understand this. Like he keep getting caught lying, and it's okay.
One argument for the immunity that the presidents receive is that the framers, slaveholders that they were, sexist that they were, amongst other things, but they were very brilliant. Some political scholars have argued that the reason why they created this presidential immunity was to protect the president against opponents who would try to disrupt the governmental process and the day-to-day governing of the government by trying to bring up trumped-up charges on the president, thus disrupting efforts to govern the people effectively.
How long ago was that law passed?
Everything is so outdated. That's why
the people that passed those, Congressman, the people that passed those laws, did they have slaves?
Without question. So their reference.
How can we still go by laws that were made by people
of white supremacy?
But how can we still have laws that are made by people that have slaves? That's part of reparations. Any law passed by anyone that have a slave should be revisited because it was only to control the slaves and not call them slaves. That's obvious.
Well, as you know, when the Constitution was drafted, black folks were described as being 3/5 of a human being, so we were looked at as even being subhuman. So in order
to still go by that Constitution,
to revamp the Constitution, we would have to call what's called a constitutional convention, and even folks like Senator Melton and the states would have to vote as well. But
let me ask you a question. If any of these people were still alive that had slaves, they'd be persecuted now. So how could anything they did while they were committing crimes currently be relevant today?
I mean, that speaks to the systemic racism that we've been talking about, the several town halls that we've had, right? Looking at the systems, figuring out what laws need to be changed. And that's why you got to commend the prosecutor for seeing something that need to be addressed.
Right.
But him making that decision, there are other cities and towns in the state of Indiana that want to adopt those same type of policies, right? Because it's a systemic issue. But at the same time, and prosecutor, this, there are folks in the state house of Indiana that want to block that from happening. And they want to prohibit from what he tried to get done.
Well, that's why we here. So can we just identify every law that was made by someone that had a slave and we should just knock those down one by one? But I do think that should be mentally addressed. I think it's part, and I would bring Taje in. How could we, a therapist, what's the therapy behind listening to laws that were made by people that had slaves?
But Dame, so let me bring in another special guest today. I'm gonna bring in Loon because I think he is both tied in with prison reform and the actual election this year and how important it is to him. I got a chance to speak with him and you a couple of days ago, and I think Loon has a lot to talk about. So I'm gonna bring him in right now. What's going on, King?
Hey, what's going on, y'all?
Good, man. Where you at right now?
I'm in Harlem right now. I'm at Melbourne on 14th and 8th. I just got through eating.
Loon, what's up? We can't see you.
Hold up, let me get some light. I apologize, y'all. I've been running
Wait a
all
second.
day.
You have to get
Is there
Loon.
enough light? I'm gonna stand outside. Hold up.
While you getting the light, let me give you a real introduction. First of all, I've known Loon since I don't even know what age. He's from 40th, and I hung out on 142nd Street. So I knew him as a very thorough individual that I respected before the music. And it was one of those things where when I got into a professional level making music, once he got there, it was like, you made it. And we always connected because it was like, yo, we know where we're from. And a lot of things have happened, and he went to jail for 10 years, and I didn't even understand why. And we have a brother in common, Jay Black, who is my brother. Like I can't even explain to you how close I am with this guy, and how much I trust this dude. But the evolution of Loon and where he's at now, and what he's trying to do, and everything he's going through, and the discipline that he's. I mean, I don't even. He's a superhero. So I don't know if he could get the light to happen, or we could see him. But I want y'all to know, he was down with Bad Boy. He doesn't listen to music anymore. No entertainment. He's straight discipline. He left. There you go.
All right. How you doing, everybody?
All right.
What's going on,
Hey,
brother?
listen, first, I want to say, just to mirror what Dame said about Congressman Andrew Carson and Senator Eddie Melton. Since I've been home, I've been really trying to sponge up a lot of information. And I think that's key, not only to this election, but any election, is to have the information. Because, information is power. And when you understand, what it is you're advocating for, then your advocacy becomes a lot stronger. I've been home now for maybe 2.5 months. And I've been very adamant to get in the thick of the battle because this is this is an environment that I'm just recently leaving, and there's a lot of things that I see, that are incorrect and definitely affecting many men. Men being warehoused.
So Loon, let me just jump in real quick. So Loon, so what are some of those things that you found to be incorrect? What are some of those things that you find to be disproportionate? What are some of those things you find to be biased in your situation that you got a chance to see firsthand?
Well, the federal prison system, if you think about all the money that's given, to operate the federal prison system, if these funds were being allocated properly, then the education department, psychology department, and all of the things that are contingent upon, correction or aiding and assisting someone in re-entering society and being effective, or being, not only effective, but, competitive as well in the workforce or whatever the case may be, none of these contingencies are put in place. So what happens is this increases the recidivism rate. This only adds to, the recipe for destruction and, individual entering society and being oblivious to, what type of role they should play in society. So that's pretty much, in a nutshell, the most, prevalent thing that I've seen. And it's just something that needs to be reformed. It's something that needs to be transformed, actually, not just reformed. It needs to be transformed.
Hey, Loon.
I spoke to Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, and if it's cool with you, I can give him your info.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
So, Loon, one of my main issues that I know is when Farris came home, he was like, "Yo, we coming home not healthy. We work out and all of this, but the only thing that's available in commissary is Snicker bars and sardines and things that don't make you healthy. You come out with heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, strong outside but weak inside." Can you speak to that? What's available to you that's healthy when you did your time?
Absolutely. The reason why I was released is because I filed for a compassionate release. Which entails, that there were underlying medical conditions that I had, obtained or acquired through the course of my incarceration. I had tuberculosis, I had acute bronchitis, I was exposed to Legionnaire. All of these things, would affected our health, and it wasn't nothing, really in place to even combat these things. So, I mean, like I said, it just set up the warehouse, man. You know what I'm saying? So if you don't take your own initiative to educate yourself, like, read books or order books and, kind of like educate yourself, then you're really just there, to be warehouse. And once you re-enter society, after that time lapse, you basically put in a position where, you're going to be oblivious to a lot of things. And that just sets a man up to resort back to the same thing that got him incarcerated in the first place.
So Luna Man, I'm gonna bring in Dr. Chris Pernell. She is probably this country's one of the country's best physicians that there is, and I wanted her to kind of talk a little bit about, again, some of the things that you talked about, which is what the experiences were, what were those conditions that you acquired while in prison, and what can we tell people of color about now so that they can prevent some of those things from happening to them, whether or not they ever step foot into a prison system or not. Dr. Chris.
Good evening, my people. To the Congressman, the prosecutor, Senator, my brother Loon, Mr. Dash, and my brother Dennis. It is a blessing to be on tonight, and I want to get right to the heart of the matter because I've been hearing a lot of things that are central to all of these conversations. White supremacy. White supremacy is at the core of the incarceration rates that we experience in the United States. White supremacy is at the core of the failure to rehabilitate and to reform persons who have been incarcerated. White supremacy is at the root of voter suppression. White supremacy is at the root of the undermining of the public institutions and the public health institutions in particular. And we must do everything in our power and agency to uproot it. And why do I start there? I start there because that's a belief system that is a thought and a power structure that is implicated across all of those other systems. White supremacy is what systemic racism sits upon. So I go after it first. And what I particularly do around prison rehabilitation and prison reform, this is a passion for me. I first started going into the youth detention centers here in North New Jersey just out of as a volunteer, which led to designing wellness programs because I knew that our youth who were being detained and incarcerated were not being positioned so that they could reach full maturity and development and regain their freedom and go forward to be a productive citizen. That has parlayed into opportunities right now on the Essex County Civilian Task Force, where this issue of healthcare is where we focus and level it down specifically in our first public hearing. And if you live somewhere that does not have a civilian task force, whether that civilian task force has oversight of a county correctional facility as it does in this case, or oversight of a police department, I would strongly encourage folks who are listening to leverage their people power in that way. What we're doing specifically in Essex County is we're looking at access to care in the prison system. On average, persons who are incarcerated in Essex County are in that correctional facility for 29 days. Too many of those persons are first being introduced to the healthcare system while incarcerated. So it is very important, since the state and the federal government has a constitutional right to provide care to those who are incarcerated. There's only two groups in the United States: Native Americans and indigenous tribes, and the incarcerated, who have a constitutional right to receive health care. So then we need to change. That's a shout out to Congressman Carson. But we need to make sure that the care that they have access to is point on, spot on. And too often in the prison system, people are not only not getting appropriate care, but they're not getting access to the things that would cause a revolution mentally, a revolution emotionally, and revolution from their physical health, right? So I want us to exert, this last statement, I want us to exert pressure and accountability from the lane that we are most apropos to use. For me, it's public health. For someone else, it might be a different lane, but use that lane to promote pressure on white supremacy through all of these different systems that we're describing.
Great. And Dr. Chris, I wanted you to kind of address a little bit about what Loon was talking about earlier, about what type of conditions or what type of illnesses that he acquired while in prison. What do you think are some of the things that are causing that with inmates of color like Loon, who went there pretty much, if you remember him, very healthy, body looks, was all in good shape and everything like that. But he goes in there and these things start to happen. What are some of the reasons why you think Loon body had reacted the way it did when it got into that system?
Fabulous question. Let's describe it from this lens because it is apropos to being incarcerated. It is apropos to living in a vulnerable or marginalized community. Only about 15% of your health outcomes are dictated by your access to health care. While access to health care is important, it only drives about 15% if you look at the literature. That means that the environment in which you are in, which gives cues that either encourage or reinforce healthy behaviors or cues that discourage healthy behaviors, right? So we're talking about your access to healthy foods. We're talking about your access to physical activity. We're talking about your access to appropriate mental development. We're talking about your access to trauma-informed care. So what's happening in an incarcerated environment is usually, and this is why I described this for Essex County, usually people are coming into the prison system with certain risk factors that were cultivated by where they lived, they worked, or they played. It may not have evidence in disease yet, but those risk factors were already primed. Then within prison, you see those risk factors heightened further because you don't have access to quality food. You don't have access to proper stimulation, development, whether that's mental, whether that's emotional. You don't have access to quality care in too many cases. We know that being in the prison system can age people prematurely. We know that they have different mortality rates than those who are non-incarcerated, and on average can sometimes die 10 years earlier than a person who had not been incarcerated. So it's the same system that's in play in the Black and brown community, right? They have those social determinants of health that are not distributed appropriately to produce health. That's why you see, whether it's in the prison or whether it's in Newark, New Jersey, when you walk outside and there are 4 fast food restaurants and an alcohol store before you get into anything else that promotes your health.
Dr. Chris, I think Loon wants to add on to something that you were talking about. Go ahead, Loon.
Basically what I saw, and it was something that was consistent. Like I've been to like maybe 4 or 5 federal institutions. A lot of these places had, very, very like dilapidated, conditions,
yes.
black mold, stuff like that.
Yes.
And I even worked in the kitchen. And wallahi, man, I swear by Allah, like I've seen boxes of food that said not for human consumption. So who micromanages, the food and all of the things, the supplies and everything that comes into the prison system? Because I watched throughout the years when they have, people that come from the regional, or a central office, DC, whatever the case may be, and they visit these institutions and they give these people a pass. They actually get a clearance to continue running the prison under the same conditions. They'll get the inmates to paint over black mold and stuff like that. They'll be lingering in the bathroom areas and any area that's moist. So people are breathing in, black mold. The vents are never, never swept. So there's a lot of like unsanitary things that take place. So even with the COVID, I was in the last institution I was in. My dorm alone was 173 inmates. We had 16 showers. We had 12 sinks, 6 urinals. 6 toilet stools and 5 urinals, 7 computers and 4 phones. So already being in close proximity with all of the, the handling of all of these things, it wasn't even offering us the supplies to clean these things until almost like the time I was released. So all of this, became an urgency around March, and it continued to, deprive us of the things that was required for us to keep the place sanitary and so on and so forth. And these type of things have no checks and no balances. You understand? So my whole thing is I learned to identify with the people that were advocating for prison reform outside of the prison. And it adds a certain kind of hope. Because a lot of the inmates, they can't identify with these things. A lot of them are familiar with FAM and certain organizations that send emails and letterheads inside, the prison system. But when you see this type of conglomerate of people right here, as we speak right now, a lot of the inmates in the prison system are not aware of, the people that's advocating for them or the people that's on their side. So what happens is we just become, what I'm saying, in a subjective state of just trying to adapt to the environment and deal with the things that are constantly reoccurring without any hope that they will change or any hope that anyone's out there advocating for it to change. So I believe that we have to burn the candle from both ends. I believe that everything that's taking place outside of the prison system needs to take place within the inside of the prison system, so that we reach a medium and and transitioning back into society is something a little bit more, realistic, opposed to sending people back into society with no skills, no education, and underlying health conditions that will also impede, pursuing or even maintaining any employment. So there's a lot of
So
things, that's at stake, and
so
I
Loon,
believe that when, yeah,
So, Loon, let me do something. Let me bring in Carlette, who also was in the prison system as well. And I think, Dr. Chris can actually speak to both of you
Yes.
about this, because I know Carlette Duffy, I had the extreme pleasure of meeting her a couple of days ago, and what a story she has. But I think, Loon, you and her have a lot in common in terms of what you all had to experience while incarcerated. So, go ahead, Carlette, tell us a little bit about you and basically what the experience was like for you in prison.
Good evening, everyone. I am Carlette
good evening.
Duffy. Good evening, Director of Reentry for the City of Indianapolis. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for allowing me to even be part of such a phenomenal group of individuals that are coming together this evening. In 1998, the state of Indiana, I was found guilty of conspiring to be an illegal pharmaceutical technician and distributor. So I had a 20-year sentence because back then, dealing in narcotics was a mandatory minimum of 20 years. And 3 grams would get you a Class A felony in Indiana. So that's 3 packets of sugar. That is what 3 grams looks like. That gets you 20 years in prison, 10 calendar that you would have to actually do if you did it in good time. So I was blessed and fortunate, depending on how you look at it. I did a plea agreement where it allowed me to plead guilty to a conspiracy charge, so that my sentence would be suspendable. So that 20 years turned into 15 suspended, 5 calendar, oh, actually 5 executed. 2 I did in the women's prison here in Indiana. And then I did a year on work release, which was $5,000 a year, and then 2 years on probation. So, we haven't even gotten into the economic issues of everything, but even in just dealing with, with the prison system, when we look at the food quality and you ask, how do they determine, who gets to serve the food or provide the food? It's the lowest bidder. And I know Senator Eddie Melton can tell you, there was a time in Indiana where the lowest bidder was a company that said, I can feed every person for $1 per meal. I can feed every person in Indiana's prison system for $1 per meal. So if you are only spending $1 on someone's meal, you're not looking for fresh fruits and vegetables. You're not looking for quality meats. You're not looking for quality products at all. So, and then when you turn to the commissary side, that's driven definitely by economics. And not only for those who are on the outside who have the contract that are providing it, but that is your currency while you're incarcerated. So you have an issue of, whether or not you can get more weight with a granola bar versus, a Snicker bar, which is, some of the conversations we had previously. So for me, when I was incarcerated, my daughter was 3 years old at the time. And the worst part of it for me was that very first visit, even though I was so excited to see her, you know, and spend time with her. But then when the visit ended, she couldn't understand why she was being pulled away from her mother. And so she screamed and cried and wanted to be with her mom, you know, and just dealing with that pain, you know, that I know that she still has that trauma today. You know, that's trauma that's lived in her. So, you know, and not only her, but in myself as well. So
we'll call that, you know, since we just dealing with trauma. Come on in, Taj. Come on in, Taj. We talking about trauma now. We know we in your backyard right now, brother. So
exactly.
I know.
When you're
What's up, everybody? Thanks for having me.
And you have those pre-existing conditions, and you have, you know, that brother Amir talked about, and that the good doctor talked about, and then you come into an environment that is unhealthy, and then your mindset is not in a place where you can even begin to get your physical health together. It exposes you to all of these conditions even further.
Wow. So Taj, so I mean, again, we talked about, you know, I know, and I'm going to get back to Dr. Chris in a moment.
Hey, Dennis, let me say one thing,
Mm-hmm.
just to get into this. I think, you know, it's when you think about it, it's like we go through all this unrecognized trauma, and we do these things to survive that actually put us in jail. Like, again, I always think this is strategic, but I think it's important that we recognize, and you brought that to my attention with children. You know, a kid might see somebody get killed, and I was a kid that saw somebody get killed a lot. Went to, you know what it looks like to get, as a child, to see a bullet hit a brain or just watch it swell up, and go to school and nobody asked me if I'm okay, and then wonder why I act the way I act. And, you know, a lot of, like, again, like a guy like Loon that went to jail, 100% is a good guy. Like, never seen him do nothing bad or try to hurt somebody. Only whatever he might have done that was illegal would have been from a place of survival, and he has to go to jail and then survive in that, get made sick, all of this. It just seems strategic. But I think the unrecognized trauma will make it where we don't have to end up there, because they're waiting for us to go there. It's a business, and like you said, they're just storing a commodity that everybody skims on. So again, Taj, can we speak on that unrecognized trauma that gets, and coming from the exact same place, a good guy that did things to survive and went to jail and had to learn from pain. And luckily he was intelligent. But what's the unrecognized trauma? How can we make it where we don't end up there?
Well, just want to say what's up to everybody. I'm Taje. Some people call me Taj. I'm a registered marriage and family therapist, practicing clinical psychologist as well. And I come from all these environments. I first got locked up at 12 years old. I've been in and out the system since I decided to change my life and become a doctor. So I suffer from a lot of these, you know, physical and mental symptoms even currently. You know, that's post-traumatic. And like Carlette was saying, it's generational. And the thing about mental health that I want to address that we're doing in mental health is we're taking our agency back. And for those people who are not familiar with agency, that means control. You know, although I do agree with the prosecutor when he said that, you know, a lot of the change starts at the ballot. For people that come from our community, it starts before the ballot. Because what Dame is saying is that the unrecognized trauma that we have is deleting our agency within ourselves. When our agency is deleted within ourselves, it's deleted in our outside environment as well. So, you know, people that's from the street, they so wrapped up in just surviving day to day that they're not even thinking about voting. They're not even thinking about finding out, you know, who's running for mayor or, you know, legislation and things like this, which is why, although we have to address, you know, people that are still in the prison system and reform and transform, like Loon said, that prison system, I feel we have to get more preventative with our mental health measures. And, you know, that goes to teaching the youngsters in school how to calm themselves, you know, so they're not so hyper vigilant all the time, so that they can slow things down in their mind and think correctly and balance all their options and make the right decisions. Because, you know, like Dame said, I mean, I saw my first body when I was, you know, probably second or third grade. So, you know, and this was walking to school too, you know what I mean? So it's like, how do you expect kids at that age to concentrate on what they're teaching, which is already, you know, not the same education that we should be getting as others. But how do you expect us to concentrate on that when we're constantly, you know, concentrating on surviving, just walking home? This takes things like mindfulness. This takes preventative measures. You know, some people meditate, some people breathe. You know, talk therapy. All these different things that we need to start from a younger age, especially coming from the neighborhoods and the environments that we come from. And if we don't address that, we're never going to take our agency back within our own personal lives, which would then transform into taking the agency back in our outside life. You know, again, you know, you can look at the biological effects that being hypervigilant all the time brings. Your brain is not working all the way. You can't learn.
Well, Taj,
You know?
Taj, let me just jump in and ask both you and Dr. Chris this question. I mean, obviously, when we look at the foods that are available in our communities, right, those things also create issues for people of color as well, right? So I want to talk. I mean, obviously, we have those issues outside of prison. Then we go in prison, and we got even worse conditions in terms of nutrition. I heard Loon talk about it. I heard Colette talk about it. And I just want us to basically touch base a little bit. I'm going to ask Dr. Chris, and I'll come back to you, Taj. Is Dr. Chris, so talk to us about nutrition and how nutrition is also some of the leading causes of some of the decisions that people are making that may actually contribute to some of the decisions that are, you know, that are landing some people in prison.
Well, let me say this about nutrition. Nutrition is definitely pristinely important during brain development for a young child, right? That is a very fertile time in a child's life. And just like nutrition is important for brain development, it has implications in physical development, right? So imagine if you're being starved mentally and you're being starved from a physical standpoint. That's what we're talking about when we describe trauma. And we know that those traumas, those adverse childhood events that children are exposed to at a pivotal time in their development implicates outcomes in adult disease. Adult disease, right? Because that's a phenomenon around, you know, epigenetics and how genetic expression can be changed by what you are exposed to. All right. So that's the one thing about nutrition, specifically in the incarceration arena, right? Because it's something we're dealing with a civilian task force that I'm on. What my brother Loon described is atrocious, but I need you all to know that this is happening in a systematic fashion across the United States, because the incarceration and penal system in the United States is fundamentally flawed, and I would dare say corrupted. And where you exert the pressure is depending on who is the governing agency or body over that particular system, whether it is a federal prison versus a county prison versus a local jail, right? What we found is what our ICE detainees and our inmates more broadly, what they were being exposed to was downright unsanitary and unhygienic, like my brother was describing. We do know that exposure to not just poor nutrition, but exposure to environmental toxins like the mold that he describes, that is evidence of environmental injustice or environmental racism, impacts health outcomes and impacts development of a person, right? So I just always want us to broaden out the conversation, because nutrition is always tied to something else, like trauma is tied to something else. And we got to have that holistic understanding or view so we know what to do to apply the pressure in these systems to demonstrate accountability. We know what we can do with our own agency. I love that you use that word again, my brother, and I will add another word to it: our own self-efficacy, our ability to make an informed choice or decision, our collective efficacy, what we can do together to begin to render not just progress, but transformation. Because too often in the United States of America, we are satisfied with progress when we need transformation. Transformation is the accumulation of progress such that you totally distort what the beginning of a thing looked like so that the end of a thing looks fundamentally different.
Wow. Well, Dr. Chris, let me just listen. You just said a mouthful there. You know, I wanted to just go back a little bit about what's happening in the country right now. One of the things that Dame and I shared with Dame yesterday, and a few principles, was this: Listen, this world right now, there's the health pandemic, but then there's also right now, there's a pandemic that we all have to be worried about too, and it's the hunger pandemic. That people across this globe are growing hungry. People across this across this globe are starving. And when we're talking about over 130 million people across the globe are basically malnourished or basically are without food. And we're talking about something that we thought would never come to this country. But if you look at the most recent, you look at the New York, the Daily News a couple of days ago, they talked about what the second wave of COVID-19 could potentially do to communities such as ours. But at the same time, what we got to understand is there are people, there are kids, there are families in our inner cities that are dying every day because of lack of nutrition and food. So I want us to basically talk a little bit about how that COVID-19 pandemic is actually leading to a bigger issue, which is that hunger pandemic, which we all know. If we just said that it alters some of the things in our development, can you only imagine what's going to happen when kids in New York and Chicago, Indiana, and Compton and Newark, what's going to happen when these kids have to start basically going to bed hungry?
And real quick, yesterday on the OSG call, you were giving the McKesey effect about the fact that, these churches don't have these pantries anymore because churches are shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, Dennis was saying he personally saw when they open up the school pantries that they have on reserve, it be lines around the corner. It don't just be people from the school, it's the whole neighborhood. So knowing that this is what it looks like now, and it's still going to be rough in the next couple of months, how are we prepared to help have those pantries knowing they're not there anymore, knowing it's going to be double the demand for them?
Well, Dame, let me talk about it real quick from an educational standpoint, because I think what was great, you heard it yesterday firsthand, was that I'm encouraging as many schools and school leaders to actually start food pantries in their schools, right? Because the schools remain open, at least the building remains open during the pandemic. And it's important that we start to stock up for our families and our communities that we know are going to be impacted by this. A couple of schools that I visited in Brooklyn this week, I've actually seen the number of streetwalkers, prostitutes up and down the streets increase literally overnight, right? And the reality of it is that now people are forced, because many are unemployed. They are forced to make decisions that may not be in our eyes immoral. I mean, it might be not be moral or may not be ethical, but they have to survive. And I understand that as an educator, all of these decisions that we talk about seem to tie right back into the systemic racism that I think Senator Melton talked about and Dr. Chris talked about and everybody else is talking about. But I want to touch specifically on what we need to do as a community to help support families that we know in the next 3 to 4 months are going to go through hell like never before. Senator Melton.
When we talk about the hunger piece, when I went back and looked at the budget of the state of Indiana, and we're approaching a budget cycle right now, the state of Indiana gave food banks across the entire state $300,000. And that's been consistent for the last decade. So when you say, what can we do? I think going back from the political perspective, I think is using that collective voice that Dr. Pernell mentioned, in terms of when it's time to advocate for budget items in state budgets, we need to increase funding for food banks. We can look at the projection of potential revenue that's going to be lost in the state. There's going to be a loss of income tax because we have a lot of unemployed individuals. There's going to be a loss of corporate tax because a lot of businesses are closing their doors. So a lot of states are going to be doing a lot with less. But in Indiana, we have a $3 billion surplus, and we have the means to invest in basic human needs. So to your point, Dennis, we have to make sure that folks are educated legislatively on what the process looks like, number one, and Congressman Carson mentioned on that earlier, but also the timing of what budgets and those dialogues and debates is going to take place, because there's going to be a lot of people trying to inject certain initiatives to make sure their special interests are covered in state budgets.
Gotcha. So hold on a second. Can I get? So hold on a second, Dane. Let me just bring Bishop Pernell in real quick, because I think he has a lot to say about this. Come on in, Bishop. Round this out, Bishop.
I don't know if he's still there because we have service. So
I know you guys got a service, right?
Yeah, he may have had to jumped off. But can I just say something to this point really briefly, and then I'm going to excuse myself. Budgets are moral documents. They are rarely framed that way, but budgets are moral documents. And what I mean by budgets are moral documents, because where governing bodies, governing authorities, elected officials put money is where they see a priority. Where you make a priority, that is a moral decision, what you choose to prioritize. And too often, I've been talking about public health for years. I didn't just become a public health doctor, but public health wasn't sexy. Didn't nobody care about public health. But now that we have a pandemic, it is an opportunity for me to talk about public health from a place that helps people to understand what is public health. So food insecurity, we have been struggling with food insecurity in marginalized and vulnerable communities for a long time. We have just gotten healthcare systems to the understanding that you can't just treat somebody's diabetes by prescribing them drugs and talking about changing what they eat if that person can't get access to food in the first place. Maybe you need to write them a prescription for a healthy meal and have a pharmacy, F-A-R-M-A-C-Y, as much as you have a pharmacy. And so what health systems need to do, and I have to always speak from the lens in which I know, health systems need to do social determinants of health screening so that we know the factors that are contributing to or causing the health outcomes that we see. There are rare instances, genetic illnesses. This is one. Genetic diseases. Yes, your genes are dictating a certain health outcome. The majority of your health outcomes are an interplay of your environment. Your behaviors are rooted in the environment in which you live. You get cues from that environment and of what you might be exposed to. I think that we gotta level up. We gotta stand in the gap. I know that people in our community in Newark, because churches and other pantries have been hit hard during the pandemic, what we were doing, we were trying to create a list of where people could get food and make sure everyone had access to that information. And then we were delivering boxes of food to patients. When you got discharged with a box of food, because we know food insecurity is real. So in our various lanes, we have to think about how do we get food into community where community-based organizations or churches don't necessarily have the resources. We got to use that collective advocacy. I'm going to use that once again to come together to say, how do we double up on those resources, and how do we say, advocate and create pressure? Because in our county has stepped up. Our county and our cities have stepped up. The city of Newark has stepped up. We're doing emergency food distributions. So while we're out there talking about COVID testing and how do you keep yourself safe, we're also talking about how you distribute food. So, that's just a few ideas that I wanted to add to the table and to the plate. And my hats are off to all of the change makers and the agents around the table. And I'm always available to push the plow. I do.
And Dr. Pernell, before you go, please make sure that you let everybody over in Newark know that one of our principals, Akbar Cook, who's over at Westside High in Newark, does an amazing job of food distribution in that area. So please have them reach out to Newark, reach out to Akbar and Westside High, and he will most certainly make sure that they eat. So please,
he's down the street from a hospital. He's down the street from a hospital. And so I know about the resources that he brings to the community, and it's part of the information that we push out, but we should continue to reiterate that and amplify that message. Okay.
Absolutely. Well, go on in, Dr. Chris. Give Bishop our love and tell him we'll see him again. Okay. All right. Hey, so I want to get back to you, Taj, right? Because I think the conversation around hunger is very important, right? And I think that we go back to some of our experiences in these marginalized communities, and I think Carlette can probably speak to it too, is that thinking about what that actually does for us and does to us, and what that actually does to our communities, 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 and what that actually does to our com psychologically and what it does to us in terms of our moods and everything else. The foods that we're consuming are problematic. However, not consuming food can be equally as problematic, and that's what we may be faced with in the next few months. You want to talk a little bit about that, and then I'm going to pass it back over to Carlette.
Yeah, I think anything that has to do with poverty, whether it's not having food to eat, if it's not having clothes, any necessities, all right, especially when you're dealing with somebody or people that are dealing with trauma, that's never going to equate to something good ever, because at the end of the day, if people can't eat,
absolutely,
people gonna eat. You understand what I'm saying? Like at the end of the day, and if we feel like there's nothing in control of our environment, the only control that we're going to take is to just go out and just do what we got to do.
And that's when that's when they go see Prosecutor Mears, right? And so just to show you how it all ties in, right?
Right.
That ultimately, when we're starving over here, eventually the prison becomes the place where they end up. And so again, I think we connect.
And they get rich. The prisons start getting rich. You get what I'm saying? And this is what I was saying before about agency. We can't. There are people that work within the government that sympathize with us, but at the end of the day, this system was built with a certain oppression in mind. You understand? So there's a lot that we have to do on our own. And I love what we're doing with the schools. I feel like, the neighborhoods need to get involved. The businesses need to get involved to provide food like the churches were doing. When I was a kid, I survived on that stuff. I lived in Patterson, New Jersey for about a year or two, and I remember when I stayed out there, like the church wasn't giving me food, I didn't eat.
Wow.
Like, period. You know what I mean? So I feel like, us doing for ourselves has to be a priority as well. You get what I'm saying? People that live in the communities, let's work together to provide food for others. You know what I mean? This is what we got to do. We got to take care of each other. You know what I mean? And, definitely the types of foods we eat, affect us neurologically, and physically. And that's the thing that got addressed earlier that I just want to touch on real quick, is that before we even enter the jails, we're already victims of this. So when we enter the jails, it's just trauma on top of trauma.
Absolutely.
So you can imagine what walks out of that prison door back into society.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
And before I get to Congressman Carson, I want you to mention a little bit about the stimulus packages, because obviously parents and communities are going to starve if money isn't given to them. I want to just get back to Carlette for a minute and say, Carlette, you've again had the experiences that I think many of us are trying to navigate people away from. So you want to talk a little bit about, again, that experience, one, when you got in prison, when it came to your nutrition and eating and things like that. And did any of that change when you came home?
It did change when I came home, but that came from education. But I kind of want to tie this into something else too. Something a little bit of what Dr. Pernell was talking about. And that's in when she, as it pertains to the criminal justice system and it pertains to mothers, it has to go with what's about to happen after the election with this new judge they trying to push down our throats with the Affordable Care Act. I heard an imam speak once, and what was said is, cow's milk feeds the body, breast milk feeds the brain. And so breast milk is the best milk for the child in its earliest stages of development, for it to have the best foot forward. And because of the ACA, women have protections as it pertains to them breastfeeding. So one of the very first woman in the city of Indianapolis to be over food insecurity, a beautiful woman by the name of Dr. Shelley Suttles. She was pushing to work with the sheriff's department to make sure that breastfeeding mothers have a place to not only pump when they come in, if they are arrested, that they can pump and then store the milk for someone else to come pick it up. She's the one that made sure that even in our building that we had a safe and secure place for breastfeeding mothers to come and eat, and to pump. So even to say that, that first meal for your child is protected is something that we really need to look at. So if they repeal the ACA, you lose that protection, you lose those rights. And another thing that happened while I was incarcerated is, when people talk about soups, also known as ramen noodles, and that was your commodity, and that's something that, or they talk about slams, also made with soups, but that's a large part of your diet while you're incarcerated. And then you come home, and because you don't have the knowledge or the understanding of what an eggplant is, or even how to prepare it, how do you begin to prepare, greens that aren't cooked to the point where there's no nutrition in them, how you begin to even understand, eating fresh fruits and vegetables at the highest point of the vitamins and minerals that you will be able to retain from them. So we have to not only educate each other on how to cook and what to eat, but also in making sure that it's available. I do love the fact that the city of Indianapolis, jumped into food insecurity early on with this pandemic. The current person who is over food insecurity, beautiful lady named Malele Kennedy, she was telling me the other day, she was in a meeting with a lot of people that do not look like her. She looks like me. And she said the question was, when do we bring people to this group who have gone through these issues that we're talking about? We need people with lived experience. I love that term. We got to have people at the table with lived experience. And she said that she was just like, I'm here. I've been on food stamps. I know what that means. I know what that's like. I've struggled to feed my children. So she helped to get the food compass that we have now. It's an app on your phones from in the city of Indianapolis that you can go to that will tell you where you can get food at any time of the day if you are in need. She helped to make sure that we have the contracts in place, and the CARES dollars that came into our city were directed to the right agencies that were going to get that food out and get it to the public. And not only that, making sure that we had Bankers Life stepped up, the home of the Colts, they stepped up, and home of Pacers, they stepped up. Lucas Oil stepped up. They gave us their freezers. They gave us access to the field so that we could use that as a staging place for a staging platform for the food boxes to be created. So that's why it's really critical for what Congressman Carson was talking about earlier in terms of understanding how your local government works, understanding who calls the shots, and being part of that process. It's not enough to stand on the outside and yell and scream about what's happening on the inside. You need to be on the inside. One of my mentors, who unfortunately is no longer with us, he used to always say, and other people could have said it, but I always attributed it to Representative Bill Crawford. If you are not at the table, you're on the menu. So this is a menu that we don't need to have in our diet where we are on it. We need to make sure that we are doing the work and being at the table and being present. And even if we're not at the table, we have people at the table. We have people like Congressman Carson at the table where we are in his ear and we can tell him this is what we need. So that is, in fact, our voice at the table. But we got to support people who are there on our behalf to make sure that they understand that these are some critical things that we need to have in place. But we also have to make sure that we are educating ourselves and we're open to the education, open to educate ourselves on why soul food is not good for us all the time. It's not good to spend gravy on everything, so we have to educate ourselves on.
So Carla, so Carla, you mentioned Congressman Carson a minute ago, and I just wanted to go to him real quick because this is a problem, right? We want people to get out and vote. We want to do something about prison reform, and we want to make sure that our families have what they need to survive. So can you mention a little bit about the stimulus packages and things like that? Can you talk a little bit about how we gonna put some money in the hands of our disadvantaged families and stuff like that? And again, before we could even get people to get out to vote, man, we got to prove to them that we are going to do something for them afterwards.
Absolutely. But before we recessed last week, and right now all of us are on 24-hour notification in the event were called back, we introduced we actually passed a $2.2 trillion aid package.
Who's we?
Congress, thank you. That was scaled back from the 3.5 aid package we introduced originally. So we're still in negotiations. Donald Trump and the Republicans are proposing a $1.8 trillion package. But the unfortunate part about this, as we talk about the stimulus, is that it doesn't look like we're going to get anything done before the election. You know, when we passed the first stimulus, we did a lot to help with the SNAP program, which is commonly known as food stamps program. We also did some adjustments to the WIC program, which helps women, infants, and children, as well as the National School Lunch Program, because we were talking about food insecurity, and Carla mentioned it as well. And we know that, as Dr. Pernell very articulately stated, that food problems cause health problems. We've seen increases in anemia. We've seen increases in asthma and long-term neurological damage. But also, even with COVID-19, we've with our original package, we made adjustments to WIC and SNAP by about 14%, but it's still not enough. Why? Because at the beginning of the pandemic, food costs rose by around 4%. And a few years ago, there was a study, and it showed that Americans throw away over 133 billion pounds of food, which carries a value of like 150, 160 billion dollars. So not only do we have food shortages, we have food excess and a waste of food. So the question becomes, how can we as legislators leverage your and my taxpayer dollars in an effective way to make sure we're addressing food insecurity in rural communities, in suburbia, in urban centers, but in a way that doesn't get politicized in the midst of additional stimulus checks? We tried to raise that amount from the $1,200 amount to $1,500 and $2,000. But our friends on the other side of the aisle, Republicans, are playing political football with the lives of even their own constituents. While they're so afraid of Donald Trump coming into their districts and states campaigning against them, they're playing political football with poor white brothers and sisters, with Black folks, with Latinos, with all Americans, simply because they don't want to jeopardize their own reelection efforts, and they don't want to piss off Donald Trump, whose reelection efforts appear to be in peril. So to Carlette's point, we need more and more people like your brother and others like Eddie who can represent the interests of those whose ears are to the ground each and every day. And we need folks who not just get votes from the community, but we need folks who, once they're in these rooms, they're advocating on our behalf. And they don't get amnesia once we send them to the state house, or we send them to Congress, or we send them to the city council or the governor's mansion. We need people who will be good stewards. And given the fact that, you know, I just reintroduced my food deserts bill last week because Indiana is a leader in the top 3 in the country for food deserts, especially Indianapolis. I reintroduced the Food Deserts Act. I'm going to reintroduce it considering I get reelected in January. So what this platform has done has brought attention to the fact that our elected officials are intertwined with not only our mental health professionals, our directors of reentry, our prosecutors, our mayors, our governors, but also the nexus between entrepreneurs and educators like Chairman Dash and Dr. McKesey, to make sure that we have an informed public going into the election.
Go ahead, Dane.
You
Unmute yourself, Dane.
All right, go. I'm there. I just wanted to say what I'm going to do as it relates to the schools and these kids not having it is, you Dennis, based on and after being on the OSG call yesterday, is going to identify 10 schools, and we're going to pay for
some hydroponic labs in their schools,
and take things. And I feel like they only cost like $1,000 or something like that, $800. That's what we all can do. If anyone can just if you in the school, just make a garden for them. If it only costs that much, and I'm gonna do this 10 to see if it works out, and then I'm gonna do more.
And I think what Dame is saying is important, because we're talking about, if nothing else we learned from this pandemic is that when everything else was closed, most schools across this country was open to try to feed the less fortunate at that particular time, and also those who were in need. And I have really been on my high horse with my principals that I need y'all to start that process immediately, if you haven't already, to start those food pantries, because it's really, really important that we stock up for what's getting ready to happen. If nothing happens, we got a lot of food. If something happens, we got a lot of food. So either way you put it, we got a lot of food. So it's just really important. Real good food. Absolutely.
Good food.
Absolutely.
Not bad food. No GMOs, and also teaching people that everyone should just get their own garden for an investment of $800. You probably save a couple of $1,000s a month.
And let me give everybody here a tip. One thing that drives me to do what I do with educators across the globe is I don't necessarily look at the adults. I look at a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old or a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old who haven't lived their life yet, and who hasn't had the opportunity to voice his displeasure with the world in which he lives in. Those are the people that I fight for. Those are the people that I look to try to empower. And I think that if we are going to make a decision as it relates to this election, as it relates to poverty, as it relates to COVID-19 and what we have to do about this particular condition, I think we got to look at the faces of our nieces, our nephews, our young children, and say, are they worth the fight? When you talk about voting, are they worth your vote? And that's really, I think, Dame, that should be our call to action as well, is, are these kids worth your vote? Because
we're also understanding that these kids will be the adults. So if they're traumatized, then they're going to jail. If they're not traumatized, they become lawmakers and people that evolve the culture.
And I think, again, I want to say thank you to Prosecutor Mears, who basically stood. I could imagine the hellstorm that you went through by making that decision, although it was the right one. I could imagine the people who were against that decision. So I want to commend you.
For me, that was the right one.
Absolutely. I commend you for doing that, because, again, I'm pretty certain that you had some hell to pay as a result of it. So I commend you for that. And if you want to say something before we wrap up, I would, I want to leave the floor to you to say something.
Well, I really appreciate those kind words, and it's easy to do, though, when you have good people who are willing to support you, like Andre Carson and others in Marion County. I think the other thing I just want to say is, we talk about food insecurity and these other issues. I think it does relate back to the criminal justice system, and we can't just look at it from the standpoint of we're here to punish people. We need to look at what can we do to help change behavior. And if someone's committing crimes or involved in the criminal justice system because of food insecurity and other issues, let's address that root cause of poverty instead of sending those people to jail or to prison. And that's going to make our community a safer place and a more fair place, because people see government as an agency trying to help people, as opposed to someone who's trying to hold someone down. And I think if we take those steps, we can make small strides to make a difference. I feel grateful in Indiana. I've got Senator Eddie Melton. I got Representative Carson. Carlette and I work very closely at the Marion County Reentry Coalition. We're on the right track, and
you most certainly are. And as I said, I wanted to give a shout out to my sister Simone Nicholas, who just reminded us of how important that food pantries and those things are going to be. And so I'm just saying to you all, it doesn't cost us much to pass on this information to schools across the globe, that they are going to be the hub that can potentially save communities from demise. So I'm encouraging everybody under the sound of my voice to actually lean a little bit more on your schools, to ask them to help, because it's going to be a cold winter, and the election is going to add to it. And I think it's really important that we do not allow our young people to go through the hell that we know is waiting for them by not getting them things to eat and for clothes to wear. So when I say a pantry, yes, food is important, but we also know that there are going to be some kids that don't have clothes, who are going to be out in the street homeless and evicted. So I just want you all to be very mindful. If you decide that you don't want to vote, you remember the face of that young person that you chose to not vote on their behalf, because see, they can't vote. So let's vote on their behalf. And again, as someone who assembles educators and principals all across this globe, I think it's really important that since we have taken the initiative to start putting pantries in our school, I'm also asking that even those of you who have office buildings and who are not necessarily in education, lean on some of your schools in in your communities and say, listen, let's start those pantries now. Eddie Melton, you got something you want to add, brother? And then I'm gonna get to Taj.
Yeah. I just want to thank everybody. Thanks, Dane, for pulling us together once again. Thanks, Dennis, for doing a great job in moderating. Andre Carson, Congressman, and you're like a mentor to me, brother. You know what you're doing on the federal level, and the work that you're doing around food deserts is not going unnoticed. I think it has set a tone for us in Indiana. Prosecutor Mears, keep doing what you're doing. Keep fighting a good fight. And Carlette, I'm looking forward to working with you one day soon. Taj, what you're providing in our communities in terms of the mental health, it sets a very high bar that we need to reach in terms of that agency that you mentioned, man. And that really resonated with me in terms of taking control of that agency. I just want to encourage everyone that's listening to continue to stay educated about the political process. This election, again, like Congressman Carson said, is the most important election of our current lifetime right now. So I just want to encourage folks to stay engaged, stay involved. Shout out to everyone that's in my district, Senate District 3 here in Indiana, in Gary, Indiana, for their love and support, or encouraging them to early vote. The polls are open. Check us out at the Genesis Center this weekend. We'll be there early voting as well. So again, and I've got to send a shout out to Faith Farms, Pastor Curtis Whitaker is what they're doing, Free Graves, with urban agriculture, urban farming in our community. So thank you all so much for what you contribute to this discussion and conversation.
Go ahead, brother Taj.
I just want to say shout out to everybody listening. Thank you for the support. Everybody that's on this panel, I learn a lot from y'all. Every one of y'all, every time that we talk. Dane, thank you as always, bro. Providing these platforms and making these things go worldwide. And I'm gonna do the best I can. And to everybody listening out there, again, take control of yourself. Use your agency to change things within yourself and within your environment. That includes your government, local and, national and everything else, and prosecutor, I also want to give a shout out to you. We need more people like yourself, in that system, speaking on behalf of people like myself and people that can relate to people, like all of us, because that's what we need, less punishment, more rehabilitation, and more preventative measures so that we don't end up incarcerated. So that's 100. And all of y'all, man, shouts out and God bless.
And we'll leave the best for last. Carlette, come on. You bring it home.
I would just echo what everyone else said, and we started out, this discussion in wanting to talk about politics and talk about prison reform. And I think that, or even justice reform, I think that what we've talked about, even in dealing with food, all of that lends to it. And all of these ideas that we have and everything that we're dealing with and everything that we're bringing together are all strung together with one thing that we need to really, really focus on and hone in on in order to help all of these issues to be laid to the wayside. And that's economic education and economic security. If people have money, if they know how to make money and earn money, not even just that, credit. Understanding what your
There
credit
you
means
go.
to you.
Say
Understanding
that
your
again. Say that again, Carlette. Say
boy,
that one more time.
I'm gonna tell you how much this is something that is in my heart, because in Indiana it is easier to buy a house than it is to rent, because if you have a felony conviction, nobody will rent to you. So my thing is this: with my job, first thing that I wanted to do with this CARES Act money, when I was given the opportunity to, I got a minority company who knows how to work with individuals that I'm talking about working with, who are on electronic monitoring right now, having to pay $14 a day with no job because you lost your job when the city shut down. So I'm working with this company to get with these people so they can understand how to read your credit report. What does it look like? Everything that's on there probably shouldn't even be there. How do you challenge it? How do you get it off? So then once you get it off, how do you build and maintain your credit? So I want, that's how we start to change all of these problems that we're dealing with. Once we have some kind of control on our financial future, on what we look like on paper, then we can really see some true change in what's happening in our community. And so everyone that is here has the ability and the awesome fortitude to move forward and to put those things into place in whatever sphere they can. And I'm telling you, just like I told y'all on Thursday, the prosecutor's office is amazing, especially at helping these brothers out here with child support issues. Their office steps up every single time, and they work with with people, because there's women out here with it too. They work with people to say, look, I know you don't have it all. You got 50,000 in the rearage. No, you don't have it. But give me a little bit and let's make a plan for the rest of it, and then we'll give you your license back. We'll take all this other stuff off of you so that you can make a way and you can get your financial and your economic security in place so that you can grow and build for not only yourself, but your family and your community as well. But thank you again for allowing for this platform. Thank you, Dame Dash. We truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Carlette, thank you so much. Again, what an honor it was to serve alongside of you guys tonight. I've learned a lot, and I'm hoping our audience did as well. We could have been many other places tonight, but we chose to be here to support the movement, which is, what Dame's talked about, calling us the commission. We are a group of people that when we get together, very, very difficult. It's very, very difficult for anybody to out-talk us and to outsmart us. And so I'm extremely blessed to be amongst you all. I want to shout out to my whole OSG family, my off-school grounds family, all the principals across the globe that always do what's best for kids. And again, I just wanted to also say what an honor it was to serve as a co-host alongside my brother, my man, Dame Dash, somebody who I grew up, admiring and learned at this stage in my life that he's helped me to go to a completely different level. So I love my brother, Dame Dash. And again, to stand alongside of him tonight was a complete honor. So Dame, we'll let you close us out, brother.
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Dame.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. I'm getting used to the system. I thought I was on. Again, everyone has said what I want to say, and really what I want to make sure the narrative is that we are in control. I think the world needs to understand that the people that we've been depending on, we should not, because I think intentionally they've oppressed and they will not stop. They'll just disguise it. And that we do have the power collectively to take things and matters into our own hand. And I think, what Dennis is saying as far as investing into the young, it's important. And that's what I started to do. I started to say, listen, these guys, they're not going to change. They're stubborn, they're scared. But these young kids, they have to be and have the facilities, the wherewithal. They have to know and have self-awareness of who they are and what real wealth is, and the power of freedom, and that no one should take that from us and what it really is. And it's the power to make decisions. And, as it relates to everything we spoke about, we have answers. It's not just talking about it. We're really going to do some things. So, again, as we speak, and I want us to continue the conversation, I think is really important, at least till the election happens, that we are able to say what needs to be said by people that are, respected, that are saying it from a place of experience, and a place of love and care. And, you know, we got to do this. We have to take control of information, not depend on them, and look how good we look doing it. You know, be proud of that. And that's what the commission is, the regulators. You know, whether it's school education, it's health, mental health, physical health, you know, politics, we're here for each other. And that's what we have to start showcasing and be proud, start bragging about it. You know, that's what I would do. And when we get a law passed, we got to celebrate it. You know, when we get somebody out of office, we got to celebrate it. When we make a school better on our own, we got to celebrate it, all of us. You know I am, because it really makes me happy. You know, and love will touch you and respect. So thank you all for actually bringing something to the table, you know, and being generous with it, and actually understanding what the bigger picture is, us working together, and us not thinking that it's whack for us to showcase each other and for us to showcase how fly we are, because that is traditionally what we do. We never showcase us. We always want to make it look better.
And what we got to remember, we got to shout out Bishop Pernell, who unfortunately had to leave. And we know I was basically going to round it out with Bishop, but he had to go to speak tonight. And so I want to shout out Bishop Pernell.
He is a bishop.
He's the bishop. You know what I'm saying? So
you know, and this is what I consider the commission, the professional truth. That's what we tell, you know, and that's what we do. Whether you like it or not, whether it feels good, you know, change sometimes makes people uncomfortable all the time, especially the ones that are using, you know, what's happening now to oppress us and to control us. So it's going to be change and it's going to be fight, but they're weak, you know, and we got each other's back.
No doubt.
Thank you.
Well, again, thank y'all all for coming. We appreciate y'all. Look out for the next flyer. We'll probably do this again next week. We're gonna try for next Friday, Dane. But if nothing else, we'll put out an announcement.
We're gonna edit this up nice, like seeing it. It looks dope though. This looks fly. I like it.
Yeah. You see that, right?
Oh yeah, and go Lakers.
Go Lakers.
Sorry, I had to.
I just want to say,
all right, guys.
Plant-based.
Yeah.
Plant-based. I see you. All right, y'all. Take care.
Everybody, Senator Congress, prosecutors, Carlette, principals, Dennis Smiley, my man.
All right, y'all.
All right.